Hello. Hey. So the two of us here today, me, myself, as you know me, Jay and Pete, are going to be discussing recovery this week. Now, this is quite a common conversation that we have with new clients. Me and Pete collectively have done hundreds and hundreds of initial consultations, and whether people feel like they're going to be physically able to take on a transformation journey is a genuine concern for a lot of our potential new clients. So we're going to take this opportunity today just to address some of those concerns and what we would do about it and talk about recovery a little bit in general. So the general way this usually goes is one of us at ATP is doing an initial consultation for a new client. And what we advise, and as we've talked about this in our previous article, which I'll link, is that clients train at least 3 times per week in the gym in the beginning. And obviously, if you want to add additional things like cardiovascular work or aerobic work into that, great. But from someone's perspective who doesn't train at all, this can seem like a huge, like Mount Everest to climb. And they're often and rightfully worried that they may not be able to keep up with this kind of level of training. So a couple of things that we've got to talk about on this, but I'll first hand over to Pete just to give us his idea on how we've set up our business and our assessments and everything to ensure that your performance and your recovery is top of our priority list.
Yeah, so I think it's quite conclusive. I think a lot of the science, all the studies that have been done on the impact of introducing exercise show that you get probably 80% of the benefits of training from going from 0 to 3 hours a week. That's been shown to be what delivers the biggest return on investment in terms of how much time you're putting in versus the impact on your overall health markers, on your longevity, on your strength, on your on all those outcomes that our clients want measured. So we want to get people to about 3 hours a week of training as precisely as we can, and as in a controlled environment. In terms of recovery, it can feel a bit daunting for people if they're coming from 0 training background to suddenly start training 3 times a week. However, I think it works for a number of reasons. I think firstly, what it does, it means that more days during the work week than not, you're actually going somewhere to train. And I think having your training centered on a particular place as an event makes it more of a permanent thing, makes it easier to keep that as an ongoing behavior, whereas twice a week can feel like it's not moving the needle as much. It becomes the exception rather than the norm. So 3 times a week is good. The Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Well, to be honest, any kind of combination within those days can be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. It doesn't matter hugely. But it's about dose response. So you want to get a dose of resistance training. You want to cause an adaptation. You want to have that adaptive response triggered. Always see a lot of clients coming in. They might be dedicating a similar amount of time, perhaps even more time than say 3 hours a week, but they're doing it in an imprecise, almost like shotgun way. They won't have a particular theory that they won't have a particular strategy that they're executing. It'll be, I did this class, I went for a run, I played tennis, and that's all fine. It's all okay. Like we're not trying to stop people from being active, but when you start looking at it from almost like time investment and opportunity costs, we want to make sure that our clients are getting really precise inputs. And again, I say really precise enough inputs that they're going to drive an adaptation. And we know it's precise enough because we just measure the outcomes. So the biggest thing we do, get people in 3 times a week. We can then quantify what they're doing, quantify the loading, ensure that they're being challenged every workout, but also challenged in a way that is doable and challenged in a way that is recoverable, challenged in a way that isn't just this kind of almost like mental resilience test every workout. there's a time and place for really pushing people, but early on, it doesn't need to be this big kind of test of how tough they can be in a gym. It needs to be, where are they? Let's assess the client. Let's see what they're capable of doing. Let's push them to their limits. And once we've found out what their edge threshold is, what 8 out of 10 effort for them, what 9 out of 10 effort for them looks like, then we can just keep trying to hit that and progress the weights over time. I think there's a big false kind of bravado, which is actually driven by a kind of almost like intellectual dishonesty on the part of the fitness industry, where everyone's supposed to be working as if their lives depend on it every single training session, that you need like lung busting intensity every single rep, every single set, every single session needs to be a 12 out of 10. And it's unrealistic. It doesn't require that. When you actually scale it back, you actually look at what the inputs are that drive adaptation. It's not that. It's consistently hitting 7, 8 out of 10 3 times a week for an extended period of time is what drives most of the adaptations that our clients are looking for. So that's why we set up how we do. In terms of recovery, lots of people look at recovery modalities, about introducing things. You get lots of questions about saunas, ice baths, foam rolling, massage guns, massage therapy. And I just say they're nice to have. But again, it's like every time you add in something, it's kind of like, we know that resistance training is a winner. We know that in resistance training is going to drive most of your gains. Anytime you add in additional kind of recovery modalities, what you're doing is you're kind of diversifying your inputs, but you're not really getting any more outcome. Sorry, my dogs are barking. So you're not really getting any additional outcome from it. All you're doing is actually spreading the adaptation over more hours. So you're getting the same adaptive stimulus from resistance training, but you're increasing the time commitment to spend on exercise. And for some clients, that makes sense. Some people will benefit tremendously from a stress reduction angle if they just commit to going in a sauna for half an hour twice a week. But again, it's looking at the opportunity cost of that time going to a sauna. If it's a sauna in their condo at home, or they've got a home sauna, fine, that's a really small commitment. If they're traveling to a specific recovery center to do ice bath, sauna, massage, you're looking at another kind of 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours per week on top of the actual training response, which is driving the adaptation. In which case, maybe they'd be better off doing 20 minutes of extra cardio at the end of every session. And at least they're kind of consolidating that time they've already committed. So a lot of it's to do with return on investment. A lot of it's to do with driving efficiency. I think before people look at layering in lots of complex recovery solutions, they should just be looking at, okay, am I maximizing my 3 hours of resistance training efficiently? And then I'd actually say the next question to ask is, what energy system work can I bring in on top of that? How can I add in some kind of cardiovascular aerobic training that's going to support my strength training? And that's probably what we look at doing with clients. There's a lot at the moment around zone 2 training. I think zone 2 training is tremendously beneficial for clients. It's one of those where the recovery cost is very, very low. So it's not actually introducing like a big stimulus to recover from, but it will drive significant health and metabolic adaptations if zone 2 is carried out at a sufficiently low intensity. For actual genuine zone 2 adaptations, which are the ones that drive metabolic health rather than fitness, you're looking at quite pedestrian scores. Like, it's quite hard for a lot of clients to do whilst running. Most clients can be better served doing their zone 2 work on a cross trainer or a bike, or even just walking on a treadmill or rucking. That's going to drive these kind of low level adaptations. Problem with zone 2, is it's really time intensive to drive significant adaptations. So I say for zone 2 work, you're almost looking at an extra block of, I say probably at least an hour to 2 hours a week that people want to be dedicating to that. And it's one of those where the impact isn't immediate. So people aren't going to see or feel this for a significant amount of time. So it's quite a big investment. So it's one of those where with clients, it's something you might layer in as a kind of next level, a phase 2 for clients. I do like to encourage clients to do their cardiovascular work, particularly if they come in to see us and they've got really low work capacity in the gym. It just means their aerobic system is not working. It's not allowing them to recover between sets, in which case we might prioritize quite a lot of aerobic work with them. That's going to drop heart rate. It's going to drop blood pressure. It's going to give us a lot of good adaptations that help reinforce resistance training that we're doing. But beyond that, zone 2 work is one of those. I mean, we were talking about it a little bit on last time. And it's one of those where you want to stack it with other behaviors. So we put together like a little document where it's just like, here's how you can like maximize the time you're spending on zone 2, because you don't want to be just going with super low, boring intensity thing. So lots of clients will do it. They'll stack meetings on top of it. They'll just sit doing emails on a bike. My home gym setup, I set up a variable height desk above a bike, so I'll just be on my computer just doing boring low intensity stuff. And I think it's more one of those things. It doesn't require a huge amount of focus. It's almost like the opposite of what you're doing in the gym. In the gym with us, you're trying to get the most out of every rep. You're trying to work hard and master like technical elements to things. Doing zone 2 on a bike or on a cross trainer, it's actually, you're trying to stack other things on top. You're trying to be a bit distracted. You don't want it to be chasing intensity. So ironically, most people, when they come to us, they're doing their aerobic or their energy systems work is too intense. They're like running too hard out in the heat in Singapore, and they're just heart rate's massively high. They're running pretty fast because they want to work hard, and they're actually driving quite a lot of recovery costs from that training. And then when they're in the gym, they're driving zero recovery costs. They're just like driving zero adaptation. They're coasting with weights. They're leaving 10 to 12 reps in reserve on most of their sets. They've been doing the same weights for like 15 years. They've been doing the same routine for 5 years. Then there's no challenge. There's nothing to adapt to. So it's really about almost inverting those and polarizing to a degree. So we have on the one end, pretty low intensity stuff that doesn't require a huge amount of focus or attention. And then the in-gym stuff is actually really driving a focus on technique, a focus on execution, a focus on intensity within the gym. So yeah, a little bit of a ramble, but that's why we set up 3 days a week. That's the core of what we do, is pushing a response to resistance training in the gym.
I think I really like the analogy or where you went with like the cost, because in so many terms we look at the monetary cost of things, but the actual time investment cost for what you're getting out of it, I think is very important to look at for some of these clients. So with us and our system, you're coming to see a coach, so that we're going to be pushing you in order to get that result that you're looking for, which is going to be like an increase in strength, increase in muscle mass, increase in range of motion, all these sorts of things. And then you have to then really look at, okay, what can I spend the rest of my allowance on after that? We just looked at, yes, aerobic work or zone 2 work is going to be a time cost. You can couple other things, but that's got a huge benefit, like a compounding benefit over time. And I think that some of these recovery modalities like ice baths, saunas, and all these things, they get popularized by elite athletes that have unlimited time budget to spend on some of these things. And they do make a difference, but they don't make a difference, or they don't have anything like the yield in terms of making sure that your foundational behaviors and habits are in check, that Pete just discussed with us. So Yeah, I like the analogy, and I think that's something that we can discuss more with people in the future going forward. So I think to give you some context or an idea of how this would work for someone in the real life would be you you have your 3 personal training sessions a week. You have to focus on achieving the complex lifts that you're able to achieve, and this is a gradual progression over time, and ensure that each and every week you're just doing a little bit more because you want to force change in your body. If you don't do something that you couldn't do before, then or you don't attempt to at least do something you did before, then we're not going to be forcing that adaptation. So then what do we spend the rest of our time on? And I said, well, if you have an extra 2 hours a week, then immediately we'd be looking at doing aerobic work. And then there's other things that we have to think about that don't cost any extra time. How is your nutrition? No one really wants to bring that into the equation. Everyone wants to go to the sauna ice bath, but nobody wants to think about, oh, what am I eating 3 times a day? Where if I'm going to eat 3 times a day anyway, that's not an additional cost of time coming out of me, right? That's just cleaning up what I'm already spending. So, yeah, I like that example, and I think that if we can get all of our clients to be base spending 5 hours a week, 3 hours on resistance training, and then whether you're doing 4 half an hours or 2 1 hours or a longer 2 hour stint of aerobic work, then what you decide to do after that can pretty much be personal preference in terms of recovery modalities, assuming you have enough time budget to spend on these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think it's what we see with exercise. You see it with nutrition more commonly, is an all or nothing approach to nutrition, where people go, all right, I'm going to be perfect now for the next 8 weeks, and it breeds a kind of fragility when you try to be over perfect and you try to over optimize, when actually, again, you don't have to be 11 out of 10, 12 out of 10 to get results. You need to be 8 out of 10 for a long enough period of time. So it's the same thing. Like, sometimes you get people coming in who they're kind of outliers because they're putting a lot into their training. They might be doing a bodybuilding split that they've seen online. They'll be training 6 days a week, big split routine. And it's just such a fragile routine because it doesn't marry with the demands of having a job, having a family, traveling for work. And it means invariably you're failing. You're missing workouts. You're having to cut workouts short. And you'll end up just training the same body parts once a week and making no progress. I like full body 3 times a week for 90% of clients, just because if you drop down from 3 sessions to twice a week because of work or family or travel, it doesn't matter that much. You're still stimulating your muscle groups twice a week. You can still drive overload. At the very least, you can put a marker down and retain what you've worked hard to build. So I think look at it from that perspective as well. It's just giving people something that's a good baseline that works even during conditions of stress, during travel, around family gatherings, around busy occasions. It means we're getting clients who are more resilient in the long term, and their results are going to be more sustainable for them.
Yeah, I agree. That's another good point. A little bit of a left topic that I hadn't really thought about coming onto this discussion was contingency planning. And I think that setting up your training to maximize benefits under all circumstances is beneficial. So total body training, as you said, if something happens and you only do twice a week, it's not always ruined. I remember slightly on this context, we all need to be thinking about progress over perfection. And someone said to me, well, if I'm having 3 McDonald's a day and then I take one of those McDonald's and make it a whole food meal, that's progress. And I was like, well, yeah, that I can't deny that is absolutely progress. So that's like the core theme of what we're doing with our clients. We have just talked about what we think is going to be like an optimal setup for a client, but our goal is to meet you wherever you're at and then just help coach you to the best version that you can be. Now, someone might never get to the point where they can spend 5 or 6 hours a week on activity. That's fine. But what we want to do is just drive you as close or keep pushing you north as possible. And, that might be 2 and 1, that might be 3 and 0, that might be any combination that kind of works for you. And also assuming that your needs might change over time. If you don't have 5 hours a week now, you might have 5 hours a week in the future, but it doesn't mean you can't make gains now.
Yeah, I think it's understanding that, and I think this comes with age and been doing this for a while now. You understand that everything's a trade-off, and that I think the industry as a whole is kind of largely driven or largely populated by 20 something personal trainers, and that's great. You because a big and they'll be very successful, because the big driver of success on the gym floor is energy and client engagement and being fun to be around for an hour. However, there's also that's a population that the trade-offs are much smaller for them. For most of those personal trainers, like going to the gym is one of their biggest hobbies. It's probably the biggest thing in their life is going to the gym. And that's simply not true of most of our client base. It's going to be quite low down on their list of priorities. So if we can get them just to prioritize, if it gets into the top 5 priorities, fantastic. That's really good. But they don't have unlimited time and energy to spend focusing on this particular goal. It needs to integrate well into what they're already doing. So the trade-off is, if I do an extra cardio session, am I spending less time with my kids? If I do this, am I missing a meeting at work? If I do this, am I not getting what I need done? For most of our clients, that's those are very real trade-offs that they encounter on a weekly basis. So we want to make sure that our proposition to them as clients is realistic and achievable, but still drives success and still drives results. So even just in terms of nutrition, if you look at fueling people, fueling clients is always going to be based on what their output is, what their activity contribution is to creating a deficit. The more training you do, the more food you can eat. It's quite simple. So if people really enjoy their food, they often find time to actually drive some of the more activity. If people really are tight on their exercise budget, they're not going to be able to eat as much food. It's pretty simple. If you sat down in an office for 10 hours a day and the only respite from that is 3 times a week you come and train with us, your diet's not going to be, you're going to have to be more focused on success in your diet. You have to be tighter in terms of measuring things as well. What do you, in terms of driving success, what do you think new clients should be focusing on week 1? Where do you think someone looking to start out on this would benefit from spending more time in their first week?
I mean, I think just it depends on if you're doing this on your own or you're doing this with coaching. I'd always say trusting in the process, getting yourself in the mindset that what I'm going to be doing is creating a person or a new version of myself that's going to be able to handle a lot more over time, and just trusting in that journey. But if I was really going to be layering on what I'm going to be doing in a week, if it comes down to daily behaviors, it's scheduling those training sessions where they can't be taken easily by other activities is going to be my first thing that I'm going to be doing. I need to look at my diary and go, okay, where is the least chance that a child, a work employee, a boss, or an event is going to steal this time out of my calendar? So I think that booking in and being either accountable to yourself or a coach is my first foundational behavior on that, because that's what's going to drive momentum, and then momentum is going to eventually turn into habitual behavior. So but if you want to learn the specifics, it's it's basically like summarizing this conversation, which is making sure that you're doing total body training 3 times a week, and then getting some degree of aerobic work in for like 1 to 2 hours. Even if that doesn't, even if you're not perfectly in zone two, like just being outside for a couple hours a week is going to have a huge benefit in general.
Yeah.
And then identifying outside of those, like what is going to be your biggest limiting factor? Is it the food? Is it my sleep hygiene? Is it alcohol consumption, or whatever it is? And then putting in strategies to work on that. It's quite hard to really put myself into the mindset of a new client, since we both have like 10, 15 years experience in this now, and can pretty much have a lot of these habits dialed in. But yeah, what I would do. I would avoid looking at what famous athletes are doing or what other people are thinking about as in terms of like pro recovery, and really just dialing in on the foundations and the basics. And it sounds so cliche and it's boring, and no one's going to be like this, oh, I'm so inspired, but basically, if you want to feel better, sleep better, recover, and all of these things, you need to challenge yourself. Because if you, by challenging yourself, you're going to be creating your body, you're going to push your body into that pro recovery state.
Yeah.
And if you never push yourself past what you can do, and you never then activate recovery, you're never going to be a person that is bigger, stronger, leaner, sleeps better, faster, all of these things that we're looking for over time. I'll repeat the same question to you, actually. Maybe you can look at it from more of a simple point of view than that.
So in terms of like early on in that first week as a new client, when you're quite motivated to make changes, I think people get almost like get caught up in executing at quite a like tactical level, and they don't spend time building the systems that they need to succeed over the coming, say, 8-12 weeks. So I think a big part of it early on is like logistics, and making sure that you're able to sustain your like nutrition plan for a significant period of time. So it's really boring stuff. It's like actually like the things that drive success. Well, the things that like a really keen, motivated client, if they don't do this, they'll fail. So if they don't actually have like a food scale at home, if they don't have like a well-stocked fridge that's with enough food for them to stick to their diet for a period of 4 or 5 days, they're going to struggle. If they don't have like 2 or 3 meals they can prepare that are high protein, high nutrition, but take maybe a minute to prepare, they're going to struggle. There's lots of like little things that you can do in that first week or two that make the entire process much, much easier. So it's really dialing in on that. I think it's getting people onboarded so they're actually able to execute systems well. And that's what we look to do with all of our clients, is make sure that they're actually, rather than just giving someone a diet plan, it's okay, this is how you actually bring this to life, right? Because obviously you can outsource your food production. That works to a degree. You can have, if you're lucky enough to have help, you can outsource some food production there. But there's still a kind of base level of education, and the more that you learn as a client in that first few weeks to a month, the more robust and more enduring the changes will be. So I think early on, there are a lot of times there's a little bit of a pushback against following a diet, like it's somehow like that's the most restrictive and horrible and hateful thing you can ask someone to do. But if you don't know how to eat, you really need to just follow orders for a period of about a week, and actually you need to pretend that you're a person who eats healthily by being a person who eats healthily. And then you'll understand how to do it. And over time, you'll get more freedom and more flexibility in what you're doing. But the first couple of weeks, the best thing most people can do is just try and be as accurate, precise and strict as possible. And then once you've actually upgraded your own kind of internal operating system around food, you're going to have much more flexibility in the long term. So I mean, particularly in the UK, but I suppose Service Station is the kind of UK version. I suppose 7-Eleven is the Hong Kong, Singapore version.
Yeah.
You know that your client's going to be quite successful when they can go into 7-Eleven and pick out a meal from the food items available that fits within their dietary needs for the day. That's the kind of the long-term definition of success, is you're able to kind of like forage in 7-Eleven and come out
Eat
with a
on the
meal
go.
that is relatively high protein. And it doesn't have to be like an organic, perfect like meal, but it has to be a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 meal that's going to support your goals. It isn't going to derail your diet. I think with clients, like if you start people off on quite a strict, precise diet, by the end of the process, they've kind of upskilled themselves to a point where they can then go to, they can go to a brunch, they can go to client drinks, they can go to 7-Eleven, and they can still be on their plan whilst doing that. So that's like a big thing. I think it's like the classic like Jocko Willink, like discipline equals freedom. It's like to a degree that's what it is. It's like if you front load your upskilling, if you front load your education, you front load the precision, then you actually down the line you have more freedom. You have more ability to be flexible. You have more ability to make decisions and improvise.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I was thinking then, back to your point about what you'd recommend for the first week, and I was just thinking about, okay, every time I've been on like a phase, what are like my cornerstone things that I put into play in order to get me in going. And it would be food prep. It would be scheduling in those sessions ahead of time, so I know exactly when I want to be there. And honestly, getting a weighing scale just so that I've got a daily weighing, so I've got some sort of gamification around it.
Yeah, I think stepping on a scale is really useful. It's just like it drives momentum, it drives feedback, and then that rebuilds motivation. That's a big component. Like people come in super motivated for about a week, and it's like that needs topping up regularly. So anytime that you create series of tasks aligned with your goals and you actually complete them and tick them off, you're like replenishing your motivation. You're getting these little dopamine drips through the day.
Yeah.
And you're associating dopamine with something that's driving you in the right direction. So you're stacking the odds in your favor. Every time you give yourself a task related to your ultimate goal that you then complete successfully, you're voting. You're like going, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is the person I am now, and you're pushing yourself more to that side of the ledger. So yeah, I think there's mistakes people make. You make people jumping in. And you see it with lots of like really well-meaning coaches who've just done. There's a desire to like kind of soft coach people with like, we're going to change one habit a week for like 43 weeks. And it's this kind of well-meaning, and it's like a paternalistic approach to behavior change that's based on, some of these psychological studies that are questionable results. And it's really hard to get clients to be successful with that way. Like, it's almost like, I think we're always biased towards stuff that we've most recently done. So if they've just completed their like behavior change nutrition course, and they're like, wow, this makes so much sense for me, they'll think, okay, well, the people fail to see that they're already quite advanced and they have like a big knowledge base on fitness and nutrition. And so these behavior change tactics are going to work really well for them. But that's not what they're dealing with when they're working with a a client who's 45 years old with 3 kids and a busy life. They don't have that base knowledge set. They actually need to build that from step one. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think we also just need to be careful of recency biases in terms of like negative impacts. Because like if we've just done our own photo shoot, we might just be like, oh man, I've got an eating disorder for a few weeks. I can't project that onto my clients. And it's like, well, being in a deficit when you're, with all due respect, at 20 to 25% or 30% is the most pro health activity you could possibly do.
Yeah.
Whereas being in a deficit from 12%, 10%, and then down to 5% actually starts to become over time detrimental for your health. So it's completely different worlds where we're working in that regard.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's funny. Now that I kind of like almost we're all guilty of applying our own circumstances and narrowing down other people's worlds based on our own worldview and our own abilities. And I've kind of like, I think I've safely been in the, middle-aged coach, middle-aged trainer group for a while now. So as a young coach, you're always worried that you're not showing empathy with your clients and their circumstances. And I've kind of, now that I actually do a bit more coaching with like younger athletes now, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, my actual, and I'm more in a kind of sports context, but I have to be super aware that I'm not projecting my own limitations onto them now. That as an older coach with like way limited like athletic ability and recovery ability, that I'm not restricting those younger clients from actually hitting, like performing and reaching their potential by like almost like throttling down the loading that they can experience and recover from. So it's like, I think there's always that kind of bias where you just go, okay, the thing I've most recently done is the most relevant thing because that's what I'm thinking about, or that's my most recent experience is universal and everyone's experience will be the same. So I think that's why, with me, you, Jeremy, kind of at the core of the product in terms of what we put out. Our average age, our time in the industry, and average age of client coach, and now I think we've all got families and kids. I think we've got a good base of real life experience to work from. That I think makes our products like a very good fit for the type of clients we work with. Because we very much at this stage in our lives, we very much are the type of clients we work with. So there's much more of a natural understanding rather than like a kind of imagined projection of what people can do.
Yeah, I think that really rounds off this and where we needed to be, which is, for better or for worse, we've all started to narrow in and even surpass a lot of the ages that our clients are. We've been doing this for a long time. We know what works for us when we were 20. We know what works for us when we were 30. You and Jeremy know what works for you in your 40s and beyond, for Jeremy's case. And, I just to summarize where we started off in this conversation, I wouldn't worry about recovery because everyone that's ever come in to us at ATP has done a transformation, we've survived 100% of the time, so you just, we have 100% success rate in terms of survival. We know that everything has a cost. Just focus on training and your aerobic work first, and all of your lifestyle behaviors are rather than be outside of that. You will improve dramatically over time. If you do have extra time to budget, then by all means try any of these latest modalities to see which one works for you. But you're just looking at a one-time benefit in that specific instance or something you need to keep up. Whereas resistance training and aerobic work over time is going to give you a benefit that you're going to keep money in the bank.
Yeah.
And that is as much as I have to say, or we have to say on this topic without it going off on another
Yeah.
tangent and
Yeah,
going left
let's
field.
wrap up. Nice. All right.
All
Good
right.
stuff.
And until next week.
Yeah, cool. We'll turn the video off.